Hello, beautiful people. I basically don't have a script, and I only have sent some few notes because that was my intention. I'm also super tired. It's 2 a.m. right now. Um, but it should be okay. The format is mostly gonna be for listening. I don't know what I'm gonna put as the background. So that's for future me when I'm editing in 2 hours. Um, and also, this isn't meant to be a some sort of any review or any deep analysis or anything. I am just here to tell my thoughts. If you're listening to the background music right now, at least I have this part planned out. Um, if you recognize this background music, this the anime in which it's from is one that I'm actually gonna make like a proper scripted and hopefully good analysis video on next week. So if you know, you know. If not, I think it's pretty obvious if you have an idea. But anyways, I actually binge episode 6 through episode 25 in one sitting of season 1 like a few days ago when I was trying to watch it so that I'm able to make this video. So, yep, let's just go. First and foremost, have to mention that Mashima Taichi is my goat. He's my favorite character for sure. Um, Followed by Chihaya, of course. But I just thought that it was really funny to me that a josei ha has such a good portrayal of the male character having a crush, right? But season 1 of Chihayafuru was the first real anime I've seen in like a really long time. I think it's been like a year since I've watched a proper one and not like something that I needed to like finish from years ago or like some slop. Like what? Like I'm sure I watched like a seasonal isekai slop that I didn't manage to finish. Hopefully I'm not washed anymore though, and I know what I'm talking about a bit. I think I would describe Chihayafuru as a eccentric sports slash josei anime about the eccentric sport itself, Karuta, being played by very eccentric people. Thanks to my friend's wisdom, essentially I subscribe to the idea that there's a spectrum of sports anime, um, ranging from realistic to superpower, essentially. So say on one end, realistic is slam dunk, and then the other end is very obvious example like Kuroko no Basket, right? And Chihayafuru is on the realistic side. I think, yeah, nothing really crazy happened even with I think the craziest thing that happened on the scale was not even the end parts, but the part when Mashima recited 100 poems from his memory or read it out randomly without overlapping a single time. And that was the most unrealistic part in the anime. So essentially, yeah, other than that is on the realistic side. But the reason I brought this up is because the loop of sports anime usually go from training to tournament, right? And then maybe some sort of filler in between. I say filler, but it's whatever side interest or say whatever side. I guess I don't really know how to put it, but say like elements, side elements like romance, drama, comedy. You need that in between, right? So that you don't get tired out from constant training or tournament uh, back to back to back, right? And especially in a realistic sport anime, your options are more limited because your your quote unquote filler time, I'll just refer to it as that now, has to be like phenomenal, right? Um, your training and your tournament doesn't have a it doesn't have like a variety of option to spice it up or to flavor it and to make it different. The reason why I'm apprehensive on saying the word filler is because it has a bad connotation to it, but I'm just using it in the sense that like this can be very important moments, right? Important time to fill in between, and Chihayafuru does like an amazing job of that. Essentially, it basically provides you with a combination of character development, like constant character building, and some hint of a sprinkle of romance and the josei part of it, other than just being a female protag. Which I'm kind of surprised it was considered josei, but then I assume that I like further on in the manga, right? It would just keep going past school arc. So, but yeah, this eccentricity of the characters and of the sport itself keeps you really engaged, right, through both the filler time and the time in which the typical sports anime loop. And I think at the end of the day, the parts in between were done spectacularly in Chihayafuru. The the character matches were absolutely phenomenal. It's some of the best in sports anime I've seen. Right. I think it shows a balanced amount of suspense and release, um, and like appropriate stake and rewards at play every single time it happens. And it doesn't have an aversion to failing, and not in a forced manner, but in a natural manner in which it hurts the most. You can't make any excuses when you lose, right? As in, like some other sports anime, sometimes they, when the main character loses, like, oh yes, but I don't know, the other team played dirty, or like, oh no, they have this crazy ace player that hit a home run every time or something. But yeah, Jiaya Furu truly shined every time a match was played, like especially involving the main characters. I was so immersed in it that every time the character take a breath, right? I take a breath, or they reposition, I reposition, they hold their breath, I hold my breath, right? This immersion of like essentially not just being on the mat and spectating them, but almost feeling like you're a part of the match itself. Is this It's also the overall theme of Chihaya passion and drawing other people in, right? Her her passion for Karota draws the other characters in just as it draws the viewers, the audience in. But the like the, there was never a moment where you have to hold your breath for too long, right? There was no like real cliffhanger. There's no real like milking of the tension or the suspense and then switching to another a B plot, right? A plot, B plot kind of thing. And so it the structure of each episode always felt like it was just direct to the point, and it felt great to watch. Of course, it being a josei, they cry a bunch, and so did I, right? But the important part is that most of the time, the cathartic emotional release is deservedly built up throughout like the episode, or maybe like even multiple episodes, right? And I think um, the example that I noted to myself here to bring up was this specific OST that I shall edit in now. Okay, hopefully that was 15 seconds, but um, whenever you hear this, essentially like, Pavlov's dog, you know, the bell. This like every time I hear this, it instantly puts me into like tension because it conditions you through that by playing it during the character matches, of course, but also you can only feel that because you are connected with the character, right? And of course they also play it during character conflicts, whether it be their own conflict with themselves or conflicts with other. But the the emotional release also from this OST, because I don't know how common it is, but this OST has its own resolution by the end. So the scene composition is always, and this is why it's paced so well, and it's integrated into. I mean, the OST itself, the pacing is integrated into the OST itself. I don't know how common it is for like an OST to have its own resolution, because usually you will see like um even in video game OST you would see like a soundtrack just specifically for like the tense part, and then it'll like cut and then play a different soundtrack meant for the resolution or more positive one. But this soundtrack has both in it, and I mean it may not seem significant, but for me, I think emotional release built into the OST, it's the same like emotional release structure that is built into the show, whether at small victories or defeats, or or especially like large victory or defeats built up throughout multiple episodes. And I think that the fact that it only takes 15 seconds of the OST to bring me right you know bring me right back into that tension, that imagery of the character matches, and without it even being like the climax of the OST itself, right? It's that is really the beginning 15 seconds, and I think it shows a fundamental level of being able to build, attachment to both the characters and the show, just beyond the sympathetic level, right? And like empathetic level of the characters. I think that sports anime sometimes forget about this, and that in fact it's simply another genre or a form of expression of the human condition. I mean, in sports, it's just expressed through, the sport itself, right? Winning and losing. And I think it's important in a sports anime that you should feel like you're also winning when the characters that you like or you're rooting for wins. And you should feel devastated when, you know, as devastated as Nashima when he loses and he can't help but, blame Arata or Nishida, even though he clearly knows that it's not their fault. And he feels super guilty. And you also end up feeling um, the same guilt, right? Because you cheered him on. I mean, you better you better did cheer him on. But without this attachment to the characters, um, winning or losing in sports anime becomes like just a plot, just story, and then the battles, in this case Karuta matches between the characters, are just then action scenes, right? Without this attachment, watching like sport anime like that is kind of tasteless for me. I think I note here that I quoted that tennis can't replace Karuta for Nishida, and neither can an intricate plot or a cool action sequence uh, replace the deeper connection that you have with a character in a sports anime. Again, right, as I said before, is sports is just simply another form of expression, and it's the same as drama or romance or mystery, right? You simply express the human condition through, say, in a drama, societal, interpersonal, or self-conflict. In mystery, right? Is I mean, you you solve some mystery that bring you closer to some truth. And in sports, again, is or let's say Chihayafuru specifically, right? It expresses the human condition through the poems, the 100 poems, the styles in which the characters play kata, and the victories and the defeat that they partake in, and that we also partake in with them. So that's, kind of the overall thought. Let me drink some water real quick. I'm telling you, this shit is like not scripted. Anyways, to make it a bit more structured though, I put in here I wanted to kind of split this up and mention story specifically in the separation of essentially the first three episodes, which is the childhood arc. Saying arc feels weird for this show specifically, and I'll mention about it soon. But childhood arc, um, school tournament, including regional and national, and then post that, which is qualifiers, basically like the latter half. So yeah, keep in mind, even though I split it like this, I don't actually think this is how it's structured. The way I see it is that Chihayafuru didn't adopt the manga or the anime. Sorry, not adapt the manga, similar to how a lot more anime are adapted uh, um, recently, I think. So say you take a chunk of material from the manga, right? However long. You take a look at how much runtime you have, whether it be like a 12 or 24 episode, or 56, whatever you want, and you see, okay, I can split this up into like say X amount of arcs, and it will have like a not a like a distinct start and finish, and like, at least you can take like you can feel it. And this isn't inherently like a good or bad thing. Of course, this was also done in the past. Not like this is only recently, or sometimes it just depends, and the source material itself is written intentionally like that, right? So if you look at any older mystery like Case Close, Kindaichi Case Files, Gosek, right? Very clear mystery, like small, medium mystery, sometimes like a larger overall plot line. But okay, anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Essentially, Chihayafuru adapts like the continuous flow as if you were reading the manga, right? You're always moving forward. I mean, you can tell that this thing ended, um, but like it's not like a like clear stopping point into a clear starting point. It's a continuous thing of like it's a continuous flow of things happening because that's how life moves on, right? Time moves. It essentially adapts with the intention of as if it wants, as if it was natural for you to keep reading it and watching it to see how things develop and how things get resolved later on, right? So this, I think, is actually a strength for the adaptation because it created a very well paced story slash adaptation of the story. I think the plot was always gradually moving forward, and the slowest it ever got was the recruitment episodes early on in, right after the childhood arc. And during those slowest moments is when the the adaptation took the time to build up its character and its central themes of the story, right? So it's not like you feeling like you're just watching wasted screen time, and it didn't feel like you were watching something super sluggish or slow, right? So this simple but like stable and consistent pacing is great because it backs it up with emotional highs coming from other avenues, right? From the characters, from its matches, right? So again, this is not like a inherently good or bad thing. You can have very out of whack pacing, and it fits perfectly into what you're trying to do, right? Again, I note here. Let's see. Steins Gate started off, you know, super slow into 180, and that that was super like that is the reason why the show is elevated is because it took its time in the first place. But we're not here to talk about Steins Gate. But yeah, the pacing is, right, it's a tool, and Chihayafuru just used the tool in the best way, right, to serve its purpose. And I mean, executed phenomenally. And even after the recruitment, when the pacing picked up, it it always still ping pong between the matches and then the character development and then the matches and like some sort of small training and then character development, always very, very steady and consistent. Oh, um, this is how you can tell I didn't actually script anything out. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, I'm laughing because I read what I noted, but schizophrenic yap here. This is like this is a very meta read, and this is just I love to do this because I just think it's fun. Not that like this is actually like accurate or very purposeful, but the schizophrenic read is that the so a central theme of Chihayafuru is the consistency of putting the effort in on the map, right? When Mashima was trying to recruit Destomu, and he said this verbatimly, right? So essentially, even though each character have their strong points, everyone except for Arata gained progress and ranked up at a steady pace. And notice how Arata is also an exception to the pacing because sorry, I'm so schizophrenic because his time was frozen for him, right? Well, after his spoilers, after his grandpa died, and so there was never a rush or a climatic episode. Any of these, say, these change in class, right? When Shihaya hit class A, for example, it was literally right after the childhood arc, and it essentially was framed as just a passage of time, right? Simple, consistent passage of time. The same thing was applied for the tournaments. Um, Nishida or Mashima, getting to class A too. Um, Kana getting to class C. Um, very, very steady and consistent. All right, progress. And even to the exception of Arata, um, when he came back, he didn't have some miracle, rise to the top, or like he didn't have, a classic. Oh no, I got to all this time. I lost at the finals only if I didn't, um, you know, whatever, right? He lost at round four, wasn't even close to the finals. So, anyways, the schizophrenic read is that as the character experiences, life steadily and consistently through their efforts, we as a viewer also experience the anime steadily and consistently through its pacing, right? That's the meta read. That is the look at why the pacing is how it is. Everything is in service of of deepening our empathy of the characters and connection with them. Okay, schizophrenic rant, yap over. Childhood arc. Let me drink another sip of water. Okay, childhood arc. Oh, okay. I actually really like the the way they started out with the childhood arc and introducing why we should care about the characters even before we actually know about the characters. So, what I mean by this is that usually you get like a drip feed of flashbacks explaining the backstory and such, right? And usually that develops your connection to the character, your you know the emotional impact they have on you. But this is the reverse, right? This give you the reason why you should care about them, or what this characterize the character before you actually know the character, right? You don't really know Arta, or you don't really know Nashima or Chihaya, in their current days, right? Like we started with the flashback. Well, not like directly, right? We started with her very tomboy showcase of putting the poster on, but right, we don't actually know her right now, right? We only know the characterization of what is seen in a flashback, and it provides the reason, the connection for us first before then we are introduced to her later. I think that was cool. Obviously, in the childhood arc, the end of the third episode, the end of the childhood arc, um, I mean, it's very emotional, right? It's and it's beautiful. I think that the other phenomenal part here is that it didn't rely on like some, you know, your usual extremely unfortunate backstory or some, or it also didn't make the children come off as preachy or like superficially idealistic, say, and it was still able to provide the emotional impact, but through the same way you would create an emotional impact with like any proper character, right? Not, but they were able to do it with you know flashback when they were kids, and I think that's phenomenal execution. Like I just think characterizing children is always really difficult. If you play Monster Hunter Wilds recently, Nada is not great. The writing for him is pretty bad. And as I said, like he came off as preachy, right? So in the course of 3 episodes, being able to do that was really good. Also, side note, how was she able to climb so many trees and onto his nest in the first place? I okay. um, yeah, I think other than that, not much more in the childhood arc. My favorite moment though, besides from then, was when Shihayo took Erida's place in the finals, and it showcased like basically the first showcase of what we were gonna get for the rest of the anime, right? The Karuta matches, and how amazing or how intense it can be. But yeah, really good introduction right into the slowest moments of the series, which was the recruitment episodes. This when again they took their time building up the central themes and connecting us with the cast. I think it tiptoed on the borderline of being like almost too heavy-handed and slash annoying. It never crossed it, and it never actually became annoying. But it was, the standard classic win, whether you win or lose versus whether you enjoy it or not, and the talent versus effort. The classic, the always ever present themes in sports anime. Um, so I think it's good that it didn't become, again, heavy-handed, like a lot of others do. I also like that the my first impression of the three characters that were introduced, so Oe, Destomu and Nishida. At first, I thought they were gonna be like here and there, like they'll be there, but I didn't realize. And I mean, good thing that this happened is that they became a central part of the cast, right? So I think I'll probably talk more about the characters later, but that's a really good part. Also, Nashima later willy-nilly broke up with his girlfriend, and that's the most efficient use of screen time I've ever seen. They spent 10 seconds introducing um, his girlfriend while setting up the promise about Karata, setting up the Karata club between um, Chihaya and Mashima, and then after that on top of that they get a 10-second comedic relief bit of him just hanging up on her. Okay, so you know, huge comedic direction. Favorite moment during the recruitment was definitely when Mashima played Chihaya, and it showed off his strength for the first time, which was his essentially his mental skill, right? His genius, um, mainly in memorization, but also in um, logical thinking, right? Be able to read his opponents, the mental game, right? Later on, there was actually a moment. Oh yeah, it was when Mashima. It was the cartoon match between Mashima and Nishida, and Retro Kun Retro guy was saying, yeah, I have nothing to learn from them when because my memorization, blah blah, whatever else better. I was like, memorization better than Mashima is the yap from that kid is crazy. You know, to borrow from Rex, the yap from that kid is crazy. This guy again, I said earlier, this guy fucking read 100 without overlapping from his mind while randomizing it, not going in order. Are you kidding me? Anyways, start of tournament was the when they got 5 people. Right before this actually was the small like one episode training in which again ping pong between matches, training, and character development. It was really cute when at the end, what do you call it? At the end, Mashima got a text from Arata saying happy birthday, telling him to say happy birthday to Chihaya, and he got super big jelly. And honestly, he's so real for that. I get it, man. But the original arc, tournament itself actually wasn't that long. Most important thing in the tournament, in my opinion, was them addressing Chihaya's tendency of being blinded by her love for karate, and I mean, you can see it in the recruitment, right? Like throughout her time recruiting. Yeah, I mean, of course it is, comedic relief, but she choked Destomu by his neck, right, and drag him across the whole school along with his desk. By the way, you know, I'm glad Destomu didn't die because he's also my goat. But yeah, she was, extremely pushy, always pushing forward, right? Which is, seen in the little little mini camp they did, and then also eventually when where it all blew up in her face is when they realized they weren't playing as a team, or more that more mainly Listomo feeling like he's useless, right? And I think this reality struck in a moment of like, oh no, I just got friends to play karate with, and through my best intentions, through my love for karate, which blinded me, I might lose a friend, or I'm gonna lose a friend to play karate with again, which was the main point. For me, that was the most important part throughout the whole tournament. Her her winning over Sudo Sudo. Her winning over Sudo was also very satisfying. That was the other interesting part to me because that last scene of her winning against Sudo, taking the last card, that scene feels very elusive to me. Essentially, like what happened was Sudo realized that he actually wanted to win, right? And it was his last year. He wants to go to national again, and this was contrasted by Chihaya. You know, a sudden. I call it a trance, but you know, the soulless or detached look that she had in that moment, right? The anime took its time to slow down and emphasize that, right? And also after the fact, Sudo even like ask himself, um, like how is she able to take that card when the desire to win escape her eyes, right? And I don't have a great read on this, admittedly, and though I do think it's very interesting though, because they brought it back up later too when she mentioned how she wished she could take her card silently, like Kana, and that was the one time she did it, I guess, and she doesn't even remember it, which is I guess why I call it a trance. But um, for me, it felt like after Nishida won his match, right? Essentially, it boils down to the last match, right? Whether she can win against Sudo or not. The Chihaya card, Chihaya Furu, the Chihaya card was on the board, right? And in that moment, she she can't fail in both sense, right? The one sense comes from the pressure of winning, right? You can't fail now, right? Like so in that sense, and then the other sense is that's her card, right? That is the Chihaya card, and she, she knows that she can't fail to take that card because of her belief in that card, right? Her trust in that card, right? Like that's her card. So for me, it seems like at that moment, right, nothing else mattered but the two things I just mentioned, and like the only thing that needed to happen is the Chihaya card being read, right, to abandon all else but her connection to that card in that moment, right, and in that sense, the solace or like the detachment comes from hesitate to say this, but like the certainty of a win, right? The of it of of it simply boiling down to the Chihaya card being read and her certainty of being able to immediately take the card. So that's my read on that scene. Interesting scene. I thought that scene was cool, but I think yeah, that was I think the highlight for the regional tournament, and then of course the release of that of Sudo saying thank you for the match, and then Chihaya falling asleep. That that was nice. Nationals wise, we literally started off with Queen, right? Yeah, I mean, because the team tournament didn't exist, basically didn't exist, right? We started off with the Queen, and I think it was a good match, mainly because the satisfaction of the first card, when she was able to take that, and I mean that was sick. And then of course, still lost by 20. I think the better match though was later when well, I mean, we didn't even see that much, but the better part of the nationals then was uh Mashima finals when of course my goat had 6 matches and he ran out of stamina, lost by 3 cards. Absolutely worst moment of my life. I still haven't recovered, but um essentially I think nationals serve as the basis of obstacle in which is gonna be introduced like from that point on. So um to tie this back more generally a bit, like in sports anime, you have to be able to up the stake, I guess, right? Like stronger opponents, obstacle to overcome, right? So I appreciate the way that Chihayafuru does it because they don't create like a stronger opponent out of thin air, right? Like say a little bit of an exaggerated example, of course, but in sports anime with superpower, like you can be playing basketball, and next thing you know, the next opponent you face can't miss a free, or the next opponent you face is 3 meters tall, right? Or this guy that have the emperor eyes. I love Kuroko no Basket, by the way. But essentially that's the way that that's the approach that a lot of sports anime take. And again, not a bad thing, but it would have worked for Chihayafuru. And the way that Chihayafuru does it, in which I absolutely love, is that Karuta is the embodiment of someone's life and traits. And to face a stronger opponent is not to just face their style of Karuta, right? It's not Chihayu's Karuta versus um say the Queen's Karuta. It is Chihaya, her life, her experiences, right? Who she is versus the Queen's life and experiences, right? Their beliefs, right? Their strengths and weaknesses, right? It all comes through. And the way I put it, I think the way I note it is that is Chihaya blinding passion for Karata able to overcome the love the queen has for Karata that has put into Karata and the blessing or the love that Karata gave back to the queen, right? You're not just, defeating you're not just figuring out how do I become faster than the queen or how do I become more accurate than the queen, right? You're also putting up 2 experiences with uh of Karuta, I guess at the end of the day to see which one is better, right? Which one overcomes it, which one comes out on top, right? This is also why characterization matters a lot because it doesn't just deepens your connection with the character, but it can also be the source in which I'll use the word power here for lack of a better term, but the source in which that they embody the sports in, right? If they didn't, or if they weren't able to characterize the queen properly later on, in which they did talk about her a bit and show a bit of her past, right? Or say if they weren't able to characterize Chihaya, right? Then Chihaya's speed or Chihaya hearing is meaningless to us, right? If they weren't able to characterize Nishima, right? His genius or his strength of memorization is meaningless, right? Is it becomes arbitrary, right? And this is why I think the cast of character is also really well kept up because essentially it it builds up the the character relationship with the sport they play, and having like a like a proper cast. Um, say for example, can Mashima body keep up with his mind, right? Can Nishida game sense make up for him not wanting, to use his mind, right? Uh, can Destomu's statistic and strategies overcome his physical and emotional waver, right? Can Kana express her love and understanding of poetry and classical Japanese history through her character, right? And having that diverse cast also helps you just create a better watching experience. And this approach in which they the approach in which they you know use to create obstacles or stronger opponents is essentially this, right? And I think it worked great, um, for the show. So see, qualifiers after that, right? That was the nationals. I don't think trying to think of whatever else I might have missed in the nationals, but wasn't that long either. After that was the qualifiers, post school tournament stuff. The the qualifier is kind of funny because Mashima lost off screen. And the other important match was the queen versus a former queen versus Chihaya. I mean, you can say that the match versus Ririka was also there, but it was mostly for her to show off what she learned, to her her lesson about timing and what she just learned after she played with Sakura, Mrs. Full Pink. Um, but yeah, story wise, like that was qualifiers is basically done, right? Because we just watch the Queen and the Masters matches, but that's basically character development and setting up for season two. So that's basically all like the notes I have to cover like plot wise. Um, but yeah, so for the cast, for the cast, um, great cast. The story basically revolves around five characters, right? Sorry, Arata, next season probably. But yeah, five characters, the club basically, and it was basically as good of screen time as you were gonna get developing all of the characters, right? That's what I mentioned earlier. Like there wasn't anyone that felt like they were left behind, or anyone that felt like that had an unsatisfactory ending to their conflict. I was worried a bit about Kana, and then they dropped they showed her what she realized that she was more lean more towards the poem readers, right? So that was good. Um, Essentially, I think throughout the entire show, everyone in the cast, anytime that they wanted to make an impact, they could have, and they did. I should say, they did make an impact whenever the show needed them to, and this happens because each character was important enough, right? Like the show cared about its cast. Each character, nobody got left behind, right? If like, for example, another reason why if Arata, came out of retirement, and all of a sudden make this insane run, and win everything forever and ever, right? It it wouldn't matter to us, or it would matter a lot less because the last time we seen him was basically childhood arc, right? And this is why Arata didn't do much, which is completely appropriate until his character gets built up again, right? Yeah, but yeah, very purposefulness, very purposeful use of screen time, and again, how much the show loves this character. I'll talk about Mashima more because he's my fave. But I mentioned earlier, very funnily, Josei portrays a guy being in crush, more accurately than Shonen does. uh, Seinen, I mean, rare Seinen's romance, but like even that, Anyways, even if say is accurate or not, I like the way Chihayafuru portrayed Mashima regarding the little tidbits, sprinkle of romance, mainly more towards the end. Say, for example, right? Okay, scrap that last sentence, ignore what I just said. But essentially, I think it portrays that the self conflict doesn't only arise from, intentional advances romantically or accidental. It doesn't even have to arise from romantic uh, advances, right? Something such as being on a train and asking Chihaya to go on a trip with him to Kanazawa, or just simply seeing Arata, or even just hearing about him, or Fukui uh, mentions, it flinches Mashima, right? It hurts him a bit. And even though it's not spoken outright, but he only get this by looking through, or he only get this through looking at Chihaya and sensing that her heart is elsewhere, right? Whether it be Karata or Arata or fucking nobody. Um, but this, I think, is a great portrayal, and it never dwells on it more than it has to, right? Never dwells on you know the romantic scene or like some sort of overthinking or some anything like that, and that's a good way to go about it, right? But yeah, I think other than that, also like Mashima a bit more because he avoided the I think some people call it the merchant's lost son trope, or like some merchants. Essentially, it's the trope of the rich guy, right? Rich family slash restricted life trope, right? Um, Super fucking common. Um, Glad he didn't fall into that. It, it basically like only mentioned in passing, and it's like implied, but you can see that um he doesn't have this. It's not like a central um internal conflict he has, right? Because it doesn't have to be, right? Um, those kind of characters get boring and tiring really, really quickly. The cast of character also actually they provide a good balance of character to watch. And for most of the show, we talk about slash the show talk about and portrays attacking character until the queen shows up. Um, but essentially, having this cast of people, um, as I mentioned above, right, of this different personality that their character embodies, right? Um, it's a lot better than it's just like, yeah, this group of friends, they're all super passionate about character, and it's simply just like, oh, who has a better skill level, right? And I think it's way more interesting to, listen to Kana explain the poems. And actually, that's Domu, my goat, second goat, when he played against Kana, and then he brought up that um what do you call it? When he brought up that she would look for cars in relation to their historical context, that Destomu is the best observer of all time. Okay, that is amazing. Like this guy have infinite notes, but like a detail like that, right, is so so fucking cool. As like a implementation of different ways of playing character, right? So that it's not boring to watch, right? Her her respect for the cards, her respect for the poems, and her personality combined makes it so that she doesn't make she avoid making mistake when she plays. Because right, like yeah, I mean, I think that's the coolest part from the cast actually. So it I think it's just good in general to avoid the like I guess there's another reason on top, but like it's good that they did it that way because it's just good to avoid like somebody saying like um what if somebody just have like perfect memory, right? And how would they lose, right? And then you show the struggle of someone who has like a genius level memory, right? Or like if somebody is super fast, right, in human reaction time, right? How would they lose, right? And then you show all this different style and how they struggle and all of that, right? So that a preemptive response to those stupid fucking questions. Cause like, oh yeah, did you know that Luffy from One Piece has never lost a Karate match? Cause he stretched his arm from across the ocean and take the opponent's Karate out. But anyways, yeah, I'm glad that we didn't run into that problem. One thing I did want to see a bit more of throughout the whole entire show is the team-based Karate matches or tournaments. One got cut out because she got sick. The main one we saw was just the regionals. I just think it'll be there's even more to explore, right? Especially the because it relates to the central theme of Chihaya and why she's playing karate also is that she finds it super cool, right, to play with friends, play karate with friends. Um, so I'm sure there'll probably be more in the future, hopefully. And yeah, well, that's just one thing I had a note here. Wanted to see more of it. I feel a bit bad. I didn't talk too much about Chihaya herself, even though she's also one of the main character. But great female protagonist, though. I'm not an expert on that, so forgive me for my ignorant sins. Of course, she was always super pushy, but that's her charm. Like Nishida says, it's not right if she's not an airhead. Um, Actually, her character is interesting because she caves easily from emotional turmoil and pressure, but she never gives up when it comes to her friends, right? Or her fires reignite when her friends are watching her, you know? Um, and actually, my favorite moment from Chihaya is when there was a buildup of her feeling that eh, debatable if she was like specifically feeling this way, right? But essentially the portrayal was that her sister is a bright shiny star and she was always in her sister's shadow, her her calling about the karate matches or her mentioning about her karate tournament, right? She was always get cut off and stuff. And then this one time she got home, right? The dinner and her parents took her or her dad took her sister to whatever, right? And she went over and she looked at the newspaper and she saw it was cut out and she found her own album and that was amazing. Um Honestly, that yeah, uh very real for that. Just look at it and start crying. She also get extra points for having the Daddy Bears t-shirts. just like the queen get extra point for. Okay, that bit on her eating a bunch of ice cream and like going into the that shit was fucking crazy. Okay, I I don't know what for or like what that was, but that was funny. But yeah, her snowman, Chihaya Daddy Bear versus the Queen Snowman shirts and whatever she used. I can't remember anymore, but yeah. To wrap it up though, because I just checked and damn, it's been pretty long actually. I thought it would be, I thought I would talk like faster and shorter, but it's hard when it's not scripted. Obviously, I like Chihayafuru. Um, Amazing show, and knowing what I just said, keep in mind what I just said, right? Hear me out the whole way, right? I gave it a 7.6 out of 10 for season one, which when I first type it out, I was like, this feels lower than I thought. And it's funny because I'm the one who typed it out, right? I'm the one who rated it. And then I realized that why, right? I realized that the same reason I mentioned earlier of it the adaptation being that it was done with the intention of telling the whole story through one continuous flow, right? The essentially it being a 7.6 or whatever score is arbitrary and it's not of its own fault, right? It's because of the limitation of the scoring system that we use, right? I can only rate because I haven't read the manga, right? I'm rating Chihayafuru season one as Chihayafuru season one, which is disadvantage to um, itself as a series, right? As an adaptation, right? I just explained. But right, I don't want to jinx it for my future self, but I'm sure if I were to go read the manga or watch season two or three, whenever I do that, like looking at it as a whole, right? Of course, it's gonna be better. So yeah, but again, I mean, I just spent like an hour or something talking about this. Don't come away with the conclusion of a score being the only thing that mattered, right? Um, Unfortunately, I wrote here as my note. This doesn't seem too long? Question mark. So, well, that could be time is relative. Long and not is subjective, so I won't say how I feel, but I hope at least that through the infinite rambling, I was able to provide some sort of perspective. I mean, hopefully you came here to hear my opinions and my thoughts about it, right? And hopefully that's what you got with random tensions and commentary interspersed through it. Is that a word? Is that how you say that? Let me look this up. Intersperse. I think so. Anyways, um, as I said, yep, in the beginning, the OST you're listening to, making a proper video of that next week. I at least should hopefully be done next week. Because I'll probably be a little bit busy after that for a bit. Other than that, I want to make the a game show slash podcast with my responsible rate leader Yukipi soon TM either later today. I planning on recording it later today or tomorrow, and I actually have to come up with the logistic for that too, and I have to edit a video. This video, and so yeah, but that's about it. Thank you for listening. Um, Hope you have a good day.